Mark Watts, Elitefts.com. I'm here on the campus of Urbana University, and today we're going to talk about auto-regulatory training in a team setting. I apologize about the lighting, but again, this is for me, just want to make sure you're able to see the screen and not worry about, for me, it would just be the screen anyway, and that way I won't have to be on camera. But this is part of our Sports Performance Coach Education Series, and again, this is just my views of how I've been able to adapt this system in the situation that I've been in the past. So hopefully it'll help you, and some of it will relate to what the situation you're in. So right now, just a little bit of background about it. Again, I am not an expert at this by any means, but I've been able to utilize it to a position where I'm comfortable with it. And that's really the difference. Is some coaches understand a concept, but when you get to the point where you're comfortable in how you implement it in your system and you believe in it, then you end up, you're in a better situation to really talk about it, because again, I know the goods and bads about it. So again, this comes from, whether you go from Supertraining or Bryan Mann's eBook, Auto-Regulatory Progressive Resistance Exercise. So again, the first in Supertraining as the DAPRE, for lack of better words, and really what it meant was you take, obviously you take a 10 rep max or a 6 rep max, and based on your performance on that first set, you adjust it. And the original one was, if you get, if you're doing a 6 rep max and you end up getting, 10 reps, then you adjust it by a certain percentage. So depends. You get one more rep than you need to, you adjust it by 2.5%. 2 more reps, 5%. And I think that's good. I think there were some ways that we tweaked it a little bit to make it fit for our situation. But that's kind of where we've evolved to. Again, it's not undulating periodization. I think some people are hashtagging some things that they don't. Undulating periodization is just it goes back to the old the heavy light medium kind of template. It's that 3-day template where you're addressing dynamic effort day on Monday, max effort on Wednesday, and repetition method on Friday. It's really not, it's the auto-regulatory means that it's back to the athlete. It's really an adjustment to any system. So I think the one thing that everybody has to realize is that you can use the auto-regulatory system in any system you have, 5-3-1 or whatnot. So I think that's really important to understand. Again, undulating periodization, for an example, at Army, we would do, basically, if I'm going to do a horizontal press, it might be a heavy bench on one day, it might be a repetition bench with dumbbells another day, it might be an explosive push-up on another day, and I'm getting that same movement in 3 different aspects. So, or I'm just, I'm undulating the total volume. I'm doing 10s one day, 6s one day, 8s one day, whatever it may be. But again, that's not the same thing if there was any confusion. If there wasn't, sorry about that. And again, really, it's athlete governed. It's those adjustments within the template that the coach provides, but really, a lot of it's based on the athlete. So, if you're going to implement a system, you have to have a trust level with your athletes that they're giving you their best effort, and they understand bar speed. They understand what proper technique is, and they're really skilled at understanding if they're able to perform the rep properly or not. So. And that takes some time, obviously. I think everybody would agree with that. Why do auto-regulation? Why I liked it, and this is being my opinion. And again, I don't know, you might not agree with me, but again, it was basically it optimized the training, especially for a large group and a large array of athletes. And then the example I give is if you have 2 athletes that are able to squat 300 pounds for 1 rep. Athlete A might be able to perform 275 for 4 or 5 reps. Athlete B might only be able to 2 or 3 reps. So when you're prescribing reps for the workout, some athletes are set up for failure. Some are set up for success based on that 1 rep max system. So this is a way that I can address that law of individual differences with those athletes. The other thing is, again, you can adjust the load or volume by athlete readiness. So again, if my max is that my clean max is 100 kilos, it's not going to be tomorrow. It might be more, it might be less, depending on recovery, but depending on the super compensation. Every day your max is different. So to say that your MAC is going to peak and be right back, so you can build off of that exactly a calendar week, away, that's hard to really, assume. So, and again, especially, athletes, especially their college, high school athletes, they have so many other stressors in their lives that can contribute or hinder, recovery, which it can hinder performance, that this is a way to really, address that. And again, it enforces urgency and importance in each set. Each rep mattered. Getting 4 reps as opposed to 5 reps was important, and important to the point where that the rest of that next set was based on your performance on every set. So for me, that was a very, very positive attribute to the system. And again, it promotes competitiveness. And again, I want those reps bumping up. And it's a way to kind of measure every single time you're training, not only every single session, but every set and every rep. So that was important. For me as a coach, I think coaches really struggle to really get their athletes to compete. And I think sometimes we go the other way, where everything's a competition and we forget about the goal of training. But at the same time, I think it is important to have some kind of competition, even if it's just for self-accountability, right? And again, it's optimal for shorter training cycles. This is one thing, interviewing Dr. Bryan Mann, the longest training cycle I've ever had was 8 weeks. That's the longest. I've never had a training cycle. The longest training cycle, and again, this is, you ask any coach this, most of the time the longest training cycle is in season. So it really is, for me to go to do a 12-week cycle for an athlete is really tough to do. So I think it's really optimal for that. It doesn't waste any workouts, doesn't waste any sessions, doesn't waste any weeks, doesn't waste any sets. So that's why I liked it as well. All right, moving on. So there's 2 ways that we'll talk about today. These are the 2 ways that I've evolved to get to, and for better, for worse, these are just the ways that I thought was easier. And I knew it wasn't the fact that I thought it was the best, is that these 2 methods were the methods that my athletes bought into the most. They understood this, they believed in it, and they were self-sufficient as it. So for me, that's what told me that they were able to do this method. So again, the first one is going to be just adjusting the volume by rep performance. So again, both systems are adjusted by rep performance. But one you adjust the volume, one you adjust the load. So with the volume, I'll kind of explain this. So this is, again, for a linear progression, this was good. And I'll talk about some of the issues that you might come up with, when you're doing this. But you adjust the subsequent reps by performance on that max set or that target set. Really, the subsequent set, the previous set. And again, we use a 2-rep drop-off system. So all my examples are going to have a 2-rep drop-off system. That is just anecdotal evidence on my part. I felt that if an athlete was truly performing a 6-rep max per se, if they were going to do that same way for another set, because of their training age, because of their ability to recruit motor units and that intermuscular coordination, and just because it's that skill set of theirs, a lot of times it was just a 2-rep drop-off. If we, an athlete that's been, powerlifting, for example, for a long time, they could probably do 3 sets of 3 with their 3-rep max if they're fully recovered, in between sets, because they're better at recruiting those motor units to produce force. So, it's kind of a coordination type thing. So we use a 2-rep drop-off, and it helped us kind of got away from those ugly reps. Right? I do a 5-rep max. That 5 that was it. I couldn't have got 6. That next set, I get 3 solid reps, and I'm finishing on. Okay, I could have maybe got 4, but let's. If I crush the hell out of 3, I think I'm going to live with that. So moving on, we'll just do. This is again. I hope you can see this here, but this is the same chart that I had in an 8-week football training program that I wrote on the site about a month ago. So really what happens is I'll give you this is a 5-rep max example. So again, for me, we are going to pick an exercise. So if you're using a conjugated type system or a linear system, but okay, this week we're going to perform an exercise for 5 repetitions. So I'm warming up. I have my warm-up sets. I'm ready to go, and I'm going to go ahead and perform 5 reps. So what happens if an athlete gets 5 reps and they could have done 2 more? What happens is we waste time. What I used to do is say, okay, rack it, add weight, try another 5-rep max. But sometimes that just added into, and it took away from some of those other work sets at those lighter loads. So we kind of got away from that and just went with this system. And this is kind of what we do. We would have, when we give them this system, they're trying to do 5 reps. So if they end up doing, we go plus or minus 2. And again, we would stop them there. And again, you'll see kind of why in the future. Really, if I do 5 reps and I end up getting 6 on that first set, well, 2 rep drop off, remember, I'm supposed to do 5, 3, 1, right? And we always did a drop set minus 10% of that target weight for plus 2. So 5, 3, 1, 7, right? That's a typical thing. I'm not saying it's the best plan ever. I'm just saying that's what we end up come up to use, and the athletes started believing it. So again, the reps at that target percent, and we use percentage to get them to that point. So for 5 reps, we would use about 85 or 85, 87.5%. Our percentages were higher because the ability of our athletes and the experience of our athletes were lower, right? They weren't able to really, 85% for them maybe probably wasn't 85%. So we use, depending on the time of year, 85 to 87% would give us this number. And I'll show you how we calculate it later. But so again, 5, 3, 1, we get 9 reps at that percent, and then 15 reps total. So again, if I'm really hitting 5 reps, we would say, okay, that's 87%. What happens again if I end up getting 6 reps on that first rep? Easy. Now we're going 6, 4, 2, and then minus 10% for 8. So now, if that 6 reps is closer to maybe 83, 85%, now I'm getting 12 reps at that percentage, and I'm getting 20 reps total. So the lower the percentage that rep or that set tends to be, the more volume those athletes will get. If I get stuck, right, I'm supposed to get 5 reps, I only get 4 because of whatever, right? Boyfriend problems, girlfriend problems, I had a test, whatever. Now I'm going 4, 2, and I'll skip that last set. So now all of a sudden trying to follow a little bit along with Prilipin's chart is now I'm going to go ahead, I'll still do that drop-off set for 6, and then really I'm getting 6 reps because again, if we feel you're a 4 rep max, we thought that was about 90%. And again, remember that was a little high, but we thought, okay, about 90%. So with 90%, we don't want you going over 7 reps, right? Because now I can make that athlete, but what happens to the week after? Remember, it's not about this week, it's about the next week as well. So that's the difference. And again, same thing with you can go through each example. So that was a way that based on if I did this many repetitions, that means that weight was not really, it might not have been 87%, it might have been closer to 90% for that week. And that's how I could adjust. So the volume was reduced based on the number of reps were reduced based on the performance of that first set. And that first set, that max set, that's game time, and that's how you get those athletes really prepared to make sure they if there's technical failure involved, if it's not a good rep that you feel is not standard to what you expect, then obviously don't count it. All right, so this is just an example of that again. So with this, volume by rep performance, and again, I'm supposed to do a 4 rep max. That's what's on my sheet. Right? I ended up doing 5, so I'll go 5, 3, 1, and then a back off set. And usually with the back off set, we'd have them just do as many as they can. Right? So that was kind of our thing. And again, same thing. 300 for 4. I end up getting 4 reps. I'm going 4, 2, and again, obviously I'll skip that last set, and I'll go obviously with 4 to 6. Sometimes we were able to include some clusters in that. So again, that could be instead of 300 for 4, then I do 300 for 4 signals, right? So I do 300 for 3, then I do 3 singles, and that's kind of our max rep system that we used to use. And again, if we wanted to incorporate clusters, really good for in season, really good if you'd have athletes that are bodyweight type athletes, wrestlers that you can't really put weight on. You don't want to get a lot of hypertrophy with extended time under tension. So you end up doing the clusters instead. And that's up to you. You can do that any way you want to. So the next part of this was adjusting the load by rep performance. And now we're actually going to change that weight. So this is probably more traditional auto-regulatory that you might be used to. So it's probably going to be along the line. So a couple adjustments we did. This is really good for the first week of the cycle. They come back. We're not testing when athletes come back. We're just not. I don't know what they were doing over winter break or summer break. You would hope that you have a culture that would elicit hard work in the off-season to understand the importance of it, but sometimes that just, for whatever reason, doesn't happen. So we would not test them but we would use basically this system to get them so we have a more accurate number for the following training cycle. So it's optimal, obviously, for in-season and non-linear. For us, in-season was non-linear. We were more conjugated in the season than we were, in the off-season, where we could have a couple-week cycles. So, and again, non-linear being still be maybe a 2 to 3 week cycle, but for the most part, it was just basically the same kind of rep scheme, and we'd rotate the exercises. And again, really good to maintain that volume by finding the rep max. So again, if you have during that time of the year, you don't want the athletes going over a certain number of reps, or you want to make sure they get in a certain number of reps, this is one of the a good system. And again, load determined by the performance of the last set. I think the future of this would be, for me, the one thing I always wanted to do was get in a system where I could, if an athlete performed a certain amount of weight with a certain amount of reps, and then based on the reps they did, and based on the velocity of the barbell, they could determine what the weight was for the next set, right? Okay, I end up getting one more rep, I'm going to bump the weight up, but the velocity of that rep was in a certain parameter, so I'd only bump up 2.5% as opposed to 5, whatever. That's, I think, going to be the future. If you can get somebody that can actually get velocity-based training to dictate based on performance of the rep and where your speed was for the next set, that's kind of where I think the future will be going. I'd love to see that happen. All right, so again, sorry about the blue chart. I know it's going to be a little tougher to see, but I'll follow along with it. And again, this is in the 8-week football article that I had, off-season training, and I'll include this in the article itself too. So this is a 3 to 5 rep max. One thing we did with this Auto-reg, first of all, we started to do a rep range. And I want a 3 rep range. I didn't want, for me, every time someone would say, okay, 5, 3, 1, it's the first week, I'm doing my set of 5, and I'm doing 14 reps. Well, that's a problem. And I understand you think that that's really good, but there's a problem. There's been a big gap in the communication between coach and athlete if that happens. For me, I think a 3 rep range, +1, +2, if you're adjusting the load, is where you want to be. And again, I'll explain to you how you do this. Maybe you do a 2, you can do a +2, -2 type system, but for me, I thought that a rep range, giving them a rep range, 3 to 5, 4 to 6, 2 to 4, whatever it may be, was a better system with that. So again, for example, we'll go with, this is a 3 to 5 rep max, right? So, and really what happens is if I'm going for a 5 rep max, per se, if I get 6, I'll add 5%. If I get 4, I drop 5%. If I get 5, I stay the same way for the next set. Now, again, it seems painfully easy. 5%, is that 100% where they should be? I don't know. I don't know if it's closer to 7. I don't know if it's closer to 2.5. But I know that 5% our athletes could do in their head, right? 10%, cut that in half, right? 300, okay, so 30%, and then half of that's 15. So again, I'm going to adjust 15 pounds. What I did at Army is we had a system. If your squat weights were up over 4, you would adjust by 20 pounds, right? It was kind of when we went through the numbers, you can adjust by 20 pounds. So again, if you're going up by 20. Go down by 20. 3 to 400, we go adjust by 15 pounds. 2 to 300, we adjust by 10 pounds, right? Below 200, we adjust by 5 pounds. So that's kind of where we got to. And again, that's pretty easy too. If that's an easier system, if the first number on that, the first digit is 4, I'm adjusting either way by 20 pounds. Because the last thing, that's the problem with adding 5 pounds or adding 10 pounds. For a 500-pound squatter, that 5 pounds is it's 1%. So you have to make sure you're cognizant of that. So that's the basic system. And here's a couple examples where I think can maybe help more. So again, let's say it's 300 for 3 to 5 reps. So a very similar example than last time. I would go ahead again. I do my warm-up sets. I'm doing 300 for 5. All right. So I get the top end of that spectrum. So where I set this percentage, I might set this at 90. I might set it at a 3 rep percentage or a 5 rep percentage, depending where I'm at. If I'm coming back from break and they're testing, I might set that up for 5 because, again, I'm expecting them to get 5. If I want them to have some success, I might set that percentage up at the higher percent if I want them to have success. If I'm testing and say, okay, this is an easy thing. We need to, after winter break, you got 4 to 6 weeks at home, we need you to do your 3 rep max for 5 reps. that's a pretty simple expectation for them to follow. So, and again, it coincides with your system. So if you're looking at 300 by 5, and then, obviously, if he ended up getting 300 for 5, he would bump up 5% to 315. Say he got that 315 for 3. Well, again, if I get 4, I'm saying the same. 3, I'm going down. I might bump back down to 300. I get that for 3. Regardless, I'm basing this weight, this bottom back offset, off of that first set, right? Another example, and I'll go into detail a little bit. Another example would be if I'm going 300 for 3, right? So again, I would drop 15 pounds. Maybe I do that for 5, and I'm going back up. And again, that weight right here is based on the first set, regardless of if I go up or down. If I go down 2 subsequent sets, then maybe that's your. If I go down 2 sets, base your drop off on the second set. If I go up 2 sets in a row, base your drop off on the second set. That's an easy thing too. If I go up then down or down then up, base your drop off the first set. That's, again, another system that you can maybe put in place so that your athletes know. Because the last thing you can do, every time your athlete asks you a question in a weight room, you're not coaching someone else. So the more you can eliminate those, the better off you are. So again, here's the areas of concern. And this is one thing that and these are actually, when I was writing these out, they end up being pretty much the same. So again, these are interchangeable. When I wrote them out, writing them twice was probably a little bit of a waste of time. But again, variation of volume can have various training effects on athletes. And again, you can't say that if I'm going to, and I can, varying the loads or varying the volume, and again, not all athletes are going to respond to that stimulus the same. And so that you have to be cognizant. Yes, it's addressing their preparedness for that day, but how they adapt to that stimulus is something you have to keep an eye on. The variation of volume can skew analysis. Again, variation in load can skew analysis. So again, if I'm looking at a training cycle and this athlete, over 6 to 8 weeks, added 30 pounds to their squat and athlete B added 15 pounds, well, maybe athlete B, the one thing you have to do is make sure you understand that maybe athlete B was getting to the point where they were going up in weight every single time. And maybe they got to a percentage or a load, maybe they had 2 or 3 weeks in a row where they're hitting PRs and they were hitting loads they'd never done, never had on their back before or had in their hands before. So it's one of those things that you have to make sure that, again, when you're looking at testing, not everybody has the same training in terms of volume or load. So just be aware of that when you're looking at numbers. The other thing is, again, the last thing is volume and the intensity can be magnified. So the volume can be magnified throughout linear progression. So all of a sudden, again, if I'm continuing to not hit numbers, not only am I not hitting those numbers, but I'm also not getting that volume sometimes as well too. So, and again, if all of a sudden I'm not getting a number, I'm 1 below every single time, well, heck, sometimes that's a whole set they're getting cut out. So with that if that's the case, if you have an athlete that goes 4-2 and then you skip that third work set, maybe you add 2 drop-off sets. That way the athlete can just accumulate some volume, because maybe that's what they need anyway. Maybe they're just not adapting to that high load in terms of intensity and percentage. And again, with the load intensity, this is one I was most afraid of as a coach. The problem is, again, especially in a linear cycle, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bump this athlete up 5%. Well, the next week, they're already being bumped up 5%. So all of a sudden, in 1 week, I've just had a 10% increase. Now, that can be, most athletes at that age, they can adapt, but at the same time, that was something that you had to always keep in mind. So for some athletes, again, we would use a basic Lander formula, which would entail that if, it would adjust their next training sets, their next training maxes based on their performance of the last week. And again, sometimes it was the same problem with the Auto-reg system, is that sometimes that would bump them up, their performance bumped their max up, and then the next week, or in the next training cycle, or the next week of the training, That's also bumped up. So all of a sudden now I'm increasing sometimes instead of 2.5 or 5%, I'm increasing 10 to 12.5%. So it just depends on where you're at in your training cycle. So just be keenly aware of that and make sure that you're making adjustments to volume, and that coincide with that. So again, some references. Supertraining, obviously, it's what people always make fun that everyone has it, but no one reads it. I think obviously, take a look at it. And then Bryan Mann's ebook on our site, the APRE, outstanding resource for how to utilize that. So it's for the price, it's a steal. So those are kind of my two references. And again, so make sure that you visit elitefts.com for any of your strength and conditioning needs. If you have any questions or comments, if you have a system that you use that really helped your athletes and really you feel you want to share, make sure that you visit the comments section on this article and put those ideas down. For me, it's not about me and being right. I'm too humble. I don't care. I just want those ideas to be able to pass on to other people. And all of a sudden now, again, if 3 people comment with 3 new ideas, think of all the different ways now that we can pick and choose to help our athletes. And that's really what it's all about. And I think when coaches start to realize that, I think we're all going to be in better shape. So thanks for your time. I appreciate it.